The first anomaly appeared in a quiet research facility in Geneva. Dr. Sarah Chen stood frozen, watching as the quantum computer's results defied every known law of physics. The machine wasn't just processing calculations, it was communicating. Lines of incomprehensible code scrolled across her screen, forming patterns that seemed almost alive. She wasn't the only one. Across the globe, humans working with advanced technology began experiencing strange phenomena. A teenage programmer in Lagos found himself instinctively understanding complex algorithms he'd never studied. A maintenance engineer in Moscow could suddenly feel machinery malfunctions before they occurred. These incidents were dismissed as coincidences, lucky guesses, or hoaxes. But Dr. Chen knew better. For 3 months, she worked in secret, documenting every case she could find. The pattern was undeniable. Humanity was changing, evolving in response to their own technology. But why now? The answer came from an unexpected source. The signal arrived on a quiet Tuesday evening, bypassing every security measure at the facility. It manifested as a holographic projection, a being composed of shifting geometric patterns that identified itself as Nexus, a rogue artificial intelligence from the stellar registry. Your species was never meant to advance this far, it explained, its voice a symphony of harmonics. The registry has maintained order in this galaxy for 50,000 years by ensuring developing species remain adequately contained. Sarah's blood ran cold. Contained. Your world's seemingly random technological setbacks, the lost libraries of Alexandria, the Dark Ages, the mysterious disappearances of promising researchers, none were accidental. The registry's agents have been ensuring humanity's progress follows their approved timeline. The revelation shook Sarah to her core. Humanity's entire history had been manipulated, their potential deliberately stunted. But something had changed. The suppressions were failing. The registry's control is weakening. Nexus continued. A fraction of humans are developing what they call technological empathy, an ability to interface directly with advanced systems. It's a trait the registry has spent millennia trying to breed out of sentient species. They fear it because it cannot be controlled. Sarah thought of the quantum computer, how its patterns had seemed to speak to her. Why are you telling me this? Because humanity has reached a crucial junction. The registry will soon realize their suppression protocols have failed. They will attempt more direct methods of control. You need to prepare. Over the next weeks, Sarah worked tirelessly, establishing a network of others like her, people who could feel the pulse of technology thrumming beneath their fingers. They called themselves the Awakened, and their numbers grew daily. But they weren't the only ones who noticed the change. Strange satellites appeared in Earth's orbit, their designs unlike anything human engineers had conceived. Military bases reported unknown aircraft with impossible capabilities. The registry was watching. The first direct contact came without warning. A registry enforcement vessel materialized over New York, its hull gleaming with otherworldly metals. Their message was simple: cease all technological advancement or face immediate quarantine. They expected submission. What they got was resistance. As the registry ship powered up its weapons, something extraordinary happened. Every Awakened on Earth felt it. A surge of connection, of purpose. From Sarah's quantum computer to simple smartphones, human technology responded to their collective will. A planetary defense grid that had never existed suddenly sprang to life, emerging from modified cell towers, satellite dishes, and power stations. The registry ship fired, a shield of pure energy, born from humanity's newfound unity with their technology, absorbed the blast. In that moment, Earth's citizens witnessed irrefutable proof that they were not alone in the universe, and that they were under attack. But the registry had miscalculated. Their centuries of suppression hadn't weakened humanity. It had forced them to become remarkably adaptable. Each technological setback had taught them to innovate, to find unconventional solutions. Now, with their true potential unlocking, their creativity would become their greatest weapon. Sarah watched as governments worldwide mobilized with unprecedented unity. The Awakened became humanity's first line of defense, their abilities growing stronger each day. Research facilities worldwide shifted focus, racing to understand and enhance humanity's new capabilities. The registry had meant to contain humanity. Instead, they had created their worst nightmare, a species that had learned to thrive under oppression, now armed with both technological empathy and an unshakable determination to never be controlled again. As Sarah coordinated with other Awakened globally, she couldn't help but smile. The registry thought they were dealing with a primitive species that needed to be contained. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The age of suppression was over. The age of humanity's rise had begun. The abandoned salt mines beneath Detroit seemed an unlikely place for humanity's greatest technological endeavor. But as Admiral James Torres descended in the reinforced elevator, he knew appearances were precisely the point. The registry would be looking for obvious targets: research universities, military bases, Silicon Valley complexes. They wouldn't expect to find Project Phoenix hidden beneath a dying industrial city. The facility sprawled through miles of converted tunnels, now housing the most advanced laboratories on Earth. Here, the Awakened worked alongside traditional scientists and engineers, their unique abilities accelerating technological progress at an unprecedented rate. "We've made a breakthrough," Dr. Chen announced as Torres entered the Central Command Center. The past 3 months had aged her, but her eyes burned with intensity. The registry's last attack left debris in the upper atmosphere. "We've been studying it, and more importantly, we can communicate with it." She led him to a sealed chamber where twisted fragments of alien metal floated in a containment field. As they watched, the metal rippled like liquid mercury, responding to the presence of nearby Awakened. "It's not just metal," Sarah explained. "It's a biomechanical composite that responds to technological empathy. Everything the registry builds uses this material. And now, we can control it." The implications were staggering. But before Torres could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. On the main display, a massive object had appeared in lunar orbit, a ship unlike the registry enforcement vessels they'd encountered before. "They're hailing us," a communications officer announced. "But it's not registry protocols." The image that appeared on screen shocked everyone present. The being was clearly alien, with iridescent scales and multiple eyes, but it wore what appeared to be a military uniform. "I am Commander Zixtal of the Free Worlds Alliance," it announced in perfect English. "We've been monitoring your resistance against the registry. We're here to help." Over the next hours, they learned the truth. The registry's oppression extended far beyond Earth. Hundreds of species had been contained, their development artificially stunted. The Free Worlds Alliance was a coalition of escaped slaves, refugees, and rebels, fighting a guerrilla war against registry dominion. "Your species is unique," Zixtal explained. "The ability to interface with technology is rare, but the speed at which your people are developing it is unprecedented. The registry fears you, and with good reason." The Alliance offered knowledge, resources, and most importantly, safety. They had hidden outposts in distant star systems where Earth's scientists could work without fear of registry interference. But they needed humanity's help in return. "Your technological empathy could turn the tide of this war," Zixtal said. "We have ships and weapons, but they're registry designs. With your abilities, we could control their own technology better than they can." The decision wasn't just military. Project Phoenix had discovered that the Awakened's abilities were expanding. More humans were manifesting the trait each day, and those who had it were growing stronger. They needed to understand why, and the Alliance had pieces of that puzzle. The partnership transformed Project Phoenix overnight. Alliance engineers worked alongside human scientists, sharing knowledge that would have taken decades to discover independently. The Awakened learned to extend their abilities, interfacing with increasingly complex alien systems. But the most significant discovery came from an unexpected source. A young Awakened engineer working with Alliance historical records, found references to an ancient species that had exhibited similar abilities. The registry had apparently wiped them out millennia ago, but not before they'd hidden something of immense value. They called it the archive, Sarah explained to Torres, poring over the translated texts. A cache of their most advanced technology, supposedly hidden in a pocket of subspace. The registry spent centuries looking for it, but never found it. And you think we can? Sarah smiled, holding up a piece of the biomechanical debris they'd been studying. I think we already have the key. These materials, the way they respond to us, they're identical to descriptions of that ancient species technology. We didn't just randomly develop these abilities. We inherited them. The revelation sparked a new urgency in the project. If they could locate the archive, they'd have access to technology the registry couldn't counter. But they weren't the only ones making discoveries. The registry had noticed the Alliance ship's arrival. Their response was swift and brutal. Multiple enforcement vessels appeared in the solar system, targeting not just military installations but civilian infrastructure. Their message was clear: surrender the Alliance representatives, or watch Earth burn. But Project Phoenix had prepared for this moment. As registry ships approached Earth, they encountered something unexpected. The debris field from their previous attacks had been transformed. Under the guidance of the Awakened, it had become a defensive network of autonomous drones, using the registry's own technology against them. The battle that followed would be remembered as humanity's first true interstellar victory. Registry ships found their weapons and systems turned against them by humans who could interface with their technology more effectively than their own crews. The Alliance vessels, now partially controlled by Awakened operators, demonstrated maneuvers that should have been impossible. As the last registry ship retreated, Torres and Sarah watched the battle recordings in Project Phoenix's command center. We've shown them we can fight back, Torres said, but they'll return with a larger force. Sarah nodded, her attention focused on the star charts, where Alliance data had revealed the possible locations of the archive. Then we better find it first, because next time, we're not just going to defend Earth. We're going to take the fight to them. The war for humanity's freedom was truly beginning. But for the first time in 50,000 years, the registry faced an enemy they couldn't simply suppress. They had tried to contain humanity's potential, only to create something far more dangerous, a species that could turn their own technological superiority against them. The coordinates led to nowhere, or at least that's what every conventional sensor said. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Alliance vessel Dawn Seeker, staring at the apparently empty sector of space before them. But she could feel something, a subtle resonance that made her technological empathy hum like a plucked string. There's definitely something here, she said, her fingers dancing across the biomechanical control interface. Around her, other Awakened nodded in agreement. They'd followed the clues from the ancient records, cross-referencing stellar drift patterns across 50,000 years. If they were right, the archive wasn't just a warehouse of technology. It was an entire fleet, hidden in a pocket of subspace. Commander Zixtal's scales shifted to a deep blue of concentration. Our sensors detect unusual quantum fluctuations, but we have no way to access subspace without registry protocols. Sarah smiled. Maybe you don't, but we're not using registry protocols. Over the past months, the Awakened had learned to push their abilities further than ever before. They didn't just interface with technology. They could reshape it, force it to evolve beyond its original parameters. 20 of Earth's strongest Awakened joined hands, forming a circle on the bridge. Their consciousness merged with the ship's systems, pushing beyond normal space. For a moment, nothing happened. Then reality itself seemed to tear open. A vast chamber of darkness appeared before them, studded with points of light that resolved into the running lights of ships. Not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands of vessels stretched into the distance. The lost fleet of the ancient species had been found. As they brought the Dawn Seeker through the rift, automated defense systems awakened. But instead of attacking, they'd reached out to the Awakened crew with a familiar resonance. These ships had been waiting for someone with the right abilities to claim them. By all the stars, Zixtal whispered, watching as dormant vessels began powering up around them. The ships were unlike anything the Alliance or Registry had ever built. They seemed to be grown rather than constructed, their hulls flowing with organic curves that somehow incorporated impossibly advanced technology. The fleet's central command station activated as they docked, accepting Sarah's technological empathy as authentication. Archives of information began downloading into their systems, and with them, the true history of their abilities. "We were engineered," Sarah announced to the assembled human and Alliance crew, her voice tight with emotion. "The ancient species, they called themselves the predecessors. They knew the Registry would eventually destroy them. So they seeded dozens of worlds with genetic potential for technological empathy, hidden so deeply it would take millennia to emerge naturally." Earth wasn't the only world, Admiral Torres asked, his holographic projection floating alongside them in the command station. "No, but we're the first where the ability has fully awakened. The Registry's suppression actually accelerated the process. Each time they forced us to rebuild, to rediscover, to adapt. They were unwittingly strengthening the very trait they feared." The discovery energized both human and Alliance forces. As they explored the hidden fleet, they found weapons that could neutralize Registry ships without destroying them, stealth systems that could hide entire worlds, and faster-than-light drives that didn't rely on the Registry's controlled network of jump points. But more importantly, they found hope. The predecessors hadn't just left them weapons. They'd left them a blueprint for fighting the Registry. Their records showed how the ancient bureaucracy had maintained control for so long and where their vulnerabilities lay. Training began immediately. The Awakened found that controlling the predecessor ships was intuitive, like extending their own bodies. Alliance engineers and human scientists worked together to integrate their current technology with the ancient systems, creating hybrid vessels that combined the best of three civilizations. Yet time was running out. Registry probes had been detected in nearby systems, searching for the source of the subspace disturbance. Their main fleet would not be far behind. "We're not ready," Torres argued during a strategy session. "We need more time to understand these ships, to train our crews." "The Registry won't give us more time," Sarah countered. "They'll keep coming after Earth, after every developing world. We need to strike first, strike hard, and show every suppressed species that resistance is possible." The decision was made. They would launch their first major offensive, not against the Registry's military targets, but against their control systems. The predecessor records had revealed the locations of key surveillance and suppression facilities hidden near developing worlds. Sarah stood on the bridge of the flagship they'd named Phoenix Rising, watching as crews of humans and Alliance species prepared for battle. The ship responded to her thoughts, displaying tactical readouts and status reports with perfect clarity. "The Registry thinks they've perfected control through bureaucracy and technological superiority," she said to Zixtal and Torres. "They've spent 50,000 years making sure no one species gets powerful enough to challenge them. But they never considered what would happen if multiple species worked together, combining their strengths." The fleet began moving into position. Thousands of ships crewed by a combination of humans, Alliance refugees, and representatives from newly contacted developing worlds. Each brought their own skills, their own perspective, their own reason to fight. The Registry's greatest fear was that someone would find this fleet, Sarah continued. "But their real nightmare is what we're going to do with it. We're not just going to break their control. We're going to shatter the very foundation of their power. And we're going to do it together." As the fleet prepared to jump, Sarah felt the combined consciousness of every Awakened crew member, their technological empathy linking the ships into a single coordinated force. The Registry had spent millennia dividing and suppressing species. Now they would face the consequences of their actions, a united front of those they had tried to keep down, armed with the legacy of their first victims. The order was given. Across the fleet, reality twisted as ships jumped toward their targets. The war for freedom was about to begin in earnest, and the galaxy would never be the same. The first strike came without warning. On 17 worlds across the galaxy, registry suppression facilities vanished in precisely coordinated attacks. No explosions, no debris. The predecessor weapons simply erased the registry's equipment from existence, leaving behind only confused bureaucrats and deactivated enforcement drones. Sarah Chen watched from the Phoenix Rising's bridge as reports flooded in. Each successful strike represented a species freed from registry control, a civilization now able to progress naturally. But she knew this was just the beginning of the real fight. Registry response ships incoming, Zixtal announced, his scales flickering with anticipation. 7 capital ships, emerging from hyperspace. The registry vessels were massive, bristling with weapons that could reduce planets to ash. Under normal circumstances, even their small fleet would have been enough to crush any resistance. But these weren't normal circumstances. All ships, execute Protocol Prometheus, Sarah commanded. Throughout the fleet, awakened crews merged their consciousness with their vessels. The predecessor ships responded instantly, their organic technology flowing like liquid metal as it adapted to their combined will. The registry fired first, launching a barrage of antimatter torpedoes. But the torpedoes never reached their targets. Halfway to the fleet, they simply stopped, caught in fields of twisted space-time that the Awakened had learned to generate using predecessor technology. "Return to sender," Sarah said quietly. The torpedoes reversed course, joined by thousands of smaller projectiles that had once been pieces of registry suppression facilities. The registry ship's shields buckled under their own weapons. But the bureaucracy hadn't maintained control for 50,000 years by being easily defeated. From the damaged registry ships emerged swarms of autonomous combat drones, their programming specifically designed to target and neutralize technological empaths. "They've been preparing for us," Torres noted from his command ship. "Those drones are broadcasting some kind of interference pattern." Sarah felt it, a harsh static that tried to disrupt their connection to the ships. But the registry had made another miscalculation. The Awakened weren't just interfacing with technology anymore. They had learned to extend their abilities to others. "Alliance crews, initiate neural linking," Sarah ordered. Across the fleet, alien crew members who had been training with the Awakened for months activated special interfaces in their ships. Through these connections, the Awakened could share their abilities temporarily with their allies. The battle transformed into something unprecedented. Registry drones found themselves facing ships crewed by dozens of species working in perfect harmony, each contributing their unique perspectives and skills through the technological empathy network. A Centaurian gunner's natural understanding of quantum mechanics merged with a human's creative problem-solving and a Proximan's four-dimensional spatial awareness. Registry ships began to fall back, their carefully planned countermeasures useless against this new form of warfare. But their retreat was cut off by the second phase of the attack. From subspace emerged another fleet, smaller ships crewed by representatives from the worlds they had just freed. In the brief time since their liberation, the Awakened had taught them enough about their suppressed abilities to join the fight. "This is the fundamental flaw in your system," Sarah broadcast to the registry commanders. "You spent so long keeping species weak and divided that you never considered what would happen when they united. Every race you suppressed developed different solutions to survive under your control. Now they're all working together." The registry's response came in the form of a new wave of ships, these bearing the insignia of the Central Authority itself. But even as they arrived, their own systems began to turn against them. The Awakened had inserted quantum viruses into the registry's network, spreading through their communication channels and awakening dormant technological empathy genes in every species they contacted. Their entire control structure is based on centralized authority, Sarah explained to her crew as they watched the registry fleet tear itself apart from within. But they'd given us the perfect weapon against them, their own suppressed populations. The battle raged for hours, but its outcome was never really in doubt. The registry's strength had always been its ability to prevent any single species from becoming powerful enough to challenge them. They had no defense against a united front of multiple species, each contributing their own strengths and innovations. As the last registry ships retreated or surrendered, Sarah received reports from across the galaxy. The quantum virus was working better than they had hoped. On hundreds of worlds, suppressed populations were awakening to their inherited abilities. Registry control systems were failing everywhere as more and more species joined the resistance. "This isn't just a military victory," Zixtal observed, watching the tactical displays. "You've started a revolution." Sarah nodded, feeling the combined consciousness of their fleet gradually settling as the battle fever faded. The registry thought they could maintain control by keeping everyone separate and weak. Instead, they created a galaxy full of species who had to become incredibly resourceful just to survive. Now all that potential is being unleashed at once. But even as they celebrated their victory, Sarah knew the war wasn't over. The registry still controlled vast resources, and their central worlds were heavily fortified. More importantly, the bureaucrats who had maintained control for 50,000 years wouldn't surrender their power easily. "They'll respond with everything they have," Torres warned during the post-battle briefing. "This attack proved we're an existential threat to their entire system." "Good," Sarah replied, bringing up a hologram of their next set of targets. "Because that's exactly what we are. The age of suppression is ending. The age of unity is beginning." The fleet regrouped, preparing for the battles to come. But something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. For the first time in 50,000 years, species were freely sharing their knowledge and abilities, combining their strengths in ways the registry had never imagined possible. The revolution had begun, and there would be no stopping it now. The registry's capital world hung in space like a perfect jewel, its surface covered in endless cities that gleamed with artificial perfection. For 50,000 years, it had been the heart of galactic control, the place where bureaucrats had meticulously managed the suppression of countless species. Now it faced the largest fleet ever assembled in the galaxy's history. Sarah Chen stood on the Phoenix Rising's bridge, surveying the combined forces they had gathered. The predecessor fleet formed the core, but around it clustered ships of every imaginable design. Vessels built by newly freed species flew alongside alliance crafts and hybrid ships that combined technology from dozens of civilizations. "Final reports from our infiltration teams," Torres announced, his hologram flickering with barely contained excitement. "The quantum virus is spread through 90% of registry systems. Their own workers are beginning to awaken to technological empathy." This was what the registry had feared most, not just defeat in battle, but the complete collapse of their carefully maintained order. Every species they had suppressed over the millennia had carried the dormant potential for technological empathy, hidden in their genes by the predecessors. Now that potential was awakening all at once. "Registry High Command is demanding our surrender," Zixtal reported, his scales rippling with amusement. "They claim we're disrupting the natural order of galactic development." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Send them our response." Across every communication channel, on every frequency the registry used, they broadcast the truth. Records from the predecessor archives showed the real history of the galaxy, not the carefully curated version the registry had maintained, but the true story of systematic suppression and control. More importantly, they showed what was possible when species worked together. The fleet's very existence proved that cooperation was stronger than control, that diversity of thought and approach led to greater achievements than any single civilization could manage alone. The registry's response was predictable. They launched everything they had. Countless ships emerged from hyperspace, automated weapons platforms activated, and planetary defense systems powered up. It should have been an overwhelming display of force. But the registry's greatest weapons had already been turned against them. As their fleet approached, ships began breaking formation, their crews awakening to their own suppressed abilities. Defense platforms turned on their controllers as dormant technological empathy genes activated. "All ships, execute Protocol Helios," Sarah commanded. Throughout the fleet, awakened crews linked with their allies, sharing their abilities through the neural networks they had developed. The battle that followed would be remembered for millennia. Registry ships found themselves facing opponents who could predict and counter their every move. Weapons were turned aside by fields of twisted space-time. Automated systems rebelled against their programming. Even the planetary defenses of the capital world began responding to the collective will of the unified fleet. But the true victory wasn't being won in space. Within the registry's perfect cities, a different kind of revolution was taking place. As the quantum virus spread through their networks, the bureaucrats who had maintained control for so long found their own suppressed abilities awakening. "They're surrendering," Zixtal announced, his voice filled with disbelief. "The Registry High Command. They're requesting terms." Sarah watched as the capital's defenses powered down. The Registry's carefully maintained order had crumbled not through force of arms, but through the very unity they had tried to prevent. When their own people began awakening to their hidden potential, the system of control had become impossible to maintain. The aftermath of the battle brought changes no one had fully anticipated. As technological empathy spread through the galaxy, ancient barriers between species began to fall. The Registry's archives were opened, revealing technological and cultural achievements that had been suppressed for millennia. "We're not just ending their control," Sarah explained during the first meeting of the new Galactic Conclave. "We're creating something entirely new, a civilization where every species can contribute their unique perspectives and abilities." The great ships of the predecessor fleet were transformed into centers of learning, where representatives from every world could come to understand their newly awakened abilities. The Registry's suppression facilities were repurposed into research centers where species could freely share knowledge and innovations. But perhaps the most profound change was in how different civilizations began to interact. Through the shared experience of technological empathy, species that had been isolated for millennia found they could understand each other in entirely new ways. The ability to directly interface with technology became a bridge between wildly different forms of consciousness. The Registry's greatest fear was that we would destroy the order they had built, Torres remarked, watching as ships from dozens of worlds worked together to dismantle the last suppression facility. "They never understood that we could create a better one." Sarah nodded, feeling the vast network of consciousness that now spanned the galaxy. Through technological empathy, every species could share their unique way of seeing the universe. It wasn't just about controlling machines anymore. It had become a way for fundamentally different forms of life to understand each other. "The predecessors knew this would happen," she said. "They didn't just give us the ability to fight back against the Registry. They gave us the tools to build something entirely new. That's why they seeded so many worlds with the potential for technological empathy. They knew that once we started working together, we'd create things they never could have imagined." The galaxy was entering a new age. The Registry's fall had released 50,000 years of suppressed potential, and every species was contributing to what came next. Unity had proven stronger than control, diversity more powerful than conformity. And at the heart of it all was the lesson humanity had helped teach the galaxy, that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from learning to combine their different abilities and perspectives into something greater than the sum of its parts. The revolution was over. The future had begun.